Honorable nominated Honorable Singh and Honorable Winkler seconded the nomination. Then can I get another name?
Thank you, Chilega. I nominate Honorable Kancho, an acting chair for this session.
All right. Do I have a seconder?
Yes, Chi. Good morning, members. I second.
You second. Okay. All right. So, members, we have two names. We've got the name of Honorable Singh and Honorable Kancho. Now we're gonna go into vote. So, can I get? In fact, Honorable Singh, do you accept the nomination? Honorable Singh. Honorable Singh, can you hear me? Honorable Singh, do you accept the nomination? Okay, members. I think I will.
I withdraw my name. I'm fine with if Honorable Singh is not online. We're happy with accept. I withdraw my nomination. Then let me put it like that.
Oh, okay, all right. So, members, do we all agree for the nomination for Honorable Kancho?
Yes.
Honorable Dlamini agrees.
Yes.
Thank you.
100%.
Oh, lovely. So, Honorable Kancho, you've been nominated as the acting chair for this meeting. Congratulations. I will hand over to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chilega. And good morning to colleagues in the meeting and everyone else in the meeting. Firstly, I would like to wish our chairperson speedy recovery. I spoke to him this morning. He is sounding stronger than the past few days. We wish him speedy recovery. Chilega, can you flight the agenda? Honorable members, we have the agenda in front of us. I welcome all of you. I also want to check Chilega because my gadget is not showing who's in the meeting, if the department is represented in the meeting.
Yes, Chair, acting chair, the department will be led by the DG.
Okay.
I got an information that a minister was supposed to attend, but she's held up in a cabinet meeting. So she won't, I think she will join later. And then Honorable Bryant will also join us at around 12.
Okay, then. Okay, noted. I just want to go through the agenda.
Sorry, Chairperson, I didn't lift my hand. I'm using my cell phone and I'm traveling in an area with intermittent connection, so I'll be in and out. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, noted, Honorable Singh. Noted, Honorable Singh, thank you. I was going to go through our agenda. Chances that colleagues, can you hear me?
Yeah,
can you hear me? Can you hear me, Chilega?
Now. Yes, we can hear you now.
Yes, we can hear you.
I just experienced load shedding now. My electricity just went off now. I think it's because of that. We have just load shedded now. Can you hear me?
This is Kappa. I can hear you. Kappa here can hear you.
Oh, okay. This is I was still outlining our agenda for the day. It's opening remarks, apologies, adoption of the agenda, responses by the department, lunch break and adjournment. Chilega, I just want to check if there's any apologies.
Yes, Chair, is that of the Minister, Honorable Bryant, who will be joining at 8. I'm sorry, at 12, and the chairperson, Mr. Matise.
Honorable members, is there any apologies from your side? Good. But Dr. Kapa, you have indicated that you have a commitment. Do you want to register that apology, Dr. Kapa?
Yes, please, Chair.
Okay, noted, Honorable Kapa.
Thank you very much.
Chair, the hand of the DG is up.
I'm disadvantaged. I can't see whose hands is up. Okay, DG, can I allow you?
Thank you very much, Chairperson. Good morning to yourself, and also good morning to the honorable members. Yes, I just wanted to also indicate that in addition to Minister's apology, we also had sent an apology for the Deputy Minister, a written apology. So I would like to register that, Honorable Chair. Thank you very much.
Thank you, DG.
Chairperson.
Chilega, can we move? Yes, Honorable Singh.
Chairperson, sorry, it's Singh here. Yeah. I'd just like to know, for arising from the apologies of the Minister and the Deputy Minister, whether the presentation that we are going to be receiving today has gone through their hands, or is it something, are they aware of the presentation, or does it come officially from the department and from the political office bearers? Thank you.
DG, can you respond? DG, can you respond to the questions?
Yes, Chairperson, I would like to confirm we've had lovely discussions in terms of going through all the comments with the DM and also with the Minister, and the Minister is the one that finally then process all the presentation and approval for the consideration of the Portfolio Committee. Her intention was to be with this meeting. However, she was hoping to be allowed out of cabinet, and she unfortunately was not able to come and join this meeting as she had originally intended, Chairperson. But yes, they have granted approval and endorsement in terms of all the presentations we'll be making today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, DG. Honorable Singh, are you happy with the response?
Yes, Chairperson, yes, thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Singh. Can we then move to adoption of the agenda? Can we move and adopt the agenda, colleagues?
I move for adoption of the agenda.
Thank you, Honorable Singh. Is there any seconder?
I'll second.
Okay, noted. Thank you, Honorable Winkler. I am now going to hand over to the department for the responses. DG, I'm told that you will be the one who will be leading the delegation in terms of the responses. Can you take the podium and present the responses? Thank you very much. My apologies, colleagues. I am also not feeling well. I have a flu, severe flu for 4 days now. You'll have to excuse me for these glitches that are happening now. I'm also not feeling well. DG, can you take over?
Thank you very much, Honorable Chair. Let me start by wishing the Chairperson and yourself a speedily recovery. And also, Chair, what I'm going to do is just provide an overview in terms of how, as a department, we've processed all the oral and written comments that were received from the public participation and consultation by the Portfolio Committee. And then I will then hand over to the team to cover then the details, taking the committee through each and every area where we have put forward a proposal for amendments, and also where we have not, we will then be responding how then it has then been processed in the department. We will also cover aspects of where there's other stakeholders. There is also a part where we've categorized that part. Chairperson, I would like to start firstly by just highlighting the strategic focus of this climate change bill. And firstly, it is to enable the alignment of policies and also to influence the country's climate change response to ensure that as a country, we transition to a low carbon and climate resilient economy. Secondly, in terms of also key, in terms of the strategic focus, it is enhancing, the bill is enhancing the country's ability and capacity over time to reduce greenhouse gas and also build climate resilience. And thirdly, it is to strengthen coordination between national sector departments and also provide policy setting and decision making to enable South Africa to meet its commitments for the NDCs. As already highlighted, Chair, the Portfolio Committee conducted physical and also virtual hearings of the bill, and this was done from September last year, 2022, to July this year. And the Portfolio Committee has registered the following submissions, where about 101 substantive written submissions have been made, and also received about over 1,001 composite emails that were from Dear South Africa. Key documents that we are presenting to the Portfolio Committee today. Firstly, we have a 48-page document, which is the detailed report that we'll be tabling today to the Portfolio Committee, which summarizes the comments and the responses which the department has processed. We also have provided the Portfolio Committee a comprehensive comments document, which is about 650 pages, which then records all comments together with the responses which would have resulted from the public hearings. What is key in terms of then the structure, the way in which we have structured these documents is that the 48-page is structured into 3 parts. The first part is going into detail around where we have looked into the comments and we have recommended amendments to the bill. And that is mainly affecting issues of definition. But overall, also the second part is around the PCC, which is the Presidential Climate Commission. And they have received a number of comments in relation to its establishment, the form and structure. We are putting forward the proposal amendments in as far as that is concerned. But also on other, we've removed on removal of discretion in terms of changes where there really must be an emphasis of must and may wherever it's used in certain clauses, Chairperson. The second part, which is part B, we will also go through where there were comments. However, we have not recommended amendments, but we have made responses in terms of how all these comments have been addressed. And then thirdly is part C, where there were comments emanating affecting other stakeholders. And we are then also going to then provide a briefing, and those stakeholders is mainly national departments, local government in terms of SALGA formation, and so on. As I had already also highlighted, Chair and honorable members, we then have a substantive document which then covers everything, which we have not necessarily, we are not necessarily going to present, but all that is going to be presented. The details also are then in the 650 page document. With your permission, Chairperson, I'm going to then request Mr. Klo Ramaru to take the committee through the details as we have prepared as a department to take the committee through our responses. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you, DG. Mr. Ramaru, can you take over?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, DG. Good morning. I just want to test first if I'm audible. I just hit by load shedding as well.
Yes, you are audible.
Okay, thank you, Chair. If you may allow, Chair, I'm going to switch off the video just to save on the broadband because of load shedding. Then I'll go through the document. Thank you very much. As DG has alluded to, we are going to take you through, honorable members, through the documents. That is the summary of the 650-page document where we have gone at length to respond to both written submissions and oral submissions on the climate change bill. And on this document, this summary, it has 3 parts. Part A focuses on recommended amendments. That's where we are making recommendation for the portfolio committee's consideration. Part 2 focuses on areas where they are not recommended for amendments, but they are, of course, detailed responses, both within this short version and the 650-page document. And part C really is around issues that were more relevant to municipalities, other sector departments, as well as issues that are relevant to Parliament in terms of the organization of the public hearing. If we can move slowly to just start with the areas of amendment. The first one, Chair, comes from, I think it's Sasol, where there is a recommendation for the inclusion of the definition of resilience. Since it has been used in the bill, I'm not going to read word by word. I'm just going to outline that we have considered positively the proposed amendment of the term resilience, and it is consistent with the UNFCCC processes or definition. And the second area is around clause 7, which talks to the issue of policy alignment. And in there, I think it's Center for Environmental Rights that have recommended the inclusion of the wording laws, where the session talks to the alignment of harmonization of policies, plans, program, and decision, and they were recommending the inclusion of laws to ensure that this bill will, to a greater extent, foster that alignment. This has indeed been considered positively, where the clause would then read as in the last column. Similarly, under clause 7, where the focus is really around the organized labor, civil society, and business being identified to provide advice. And there has been an inclusion there where the Center for Environmental Rights wanted to request the inclusion of research organization and committees and so forth. So we have included the element that would cover that by including relevant stakeholders. This is to avoid a situation where we enumerate in terms of communities, academia, research institutions, but we're saying relevant stakeholders that would be inclusive and can provide a basis for inclusion of other key stakeholders in the process, Chair. If we can move, Mr. Sfusiso. The bigger chunk, Chair, if I can put it that way, that came very strongly, it's around the clause 10 that deals with the Presidential Climate Commission. And I think there are a number of inputs and comments that came on this. One is there should be a stipulation of the appointment period for the PCC members, and there should be a process of appointing the PCC to be inclusive and to be transparent, and then there should be a process to recall the commissioners. And clause 10, they specifically say that they should specify that the appointment by the president will be for a period not exceeding 5 years and must be renewed for a period not exceeding 5 years, meaning that it seems to be 2 terms. And of course, there's a submission that the clause 10 does not clarify on who the PCC reports to and in the current format. And the issue of transparency as well came very strongly to say we need to ensure that there is transparency and coordination and accountability of the Presidential Commission. And of course, the Presidential Commission, I think there was an underscoring that it does exist. In considering these submissions, Chair and honorable members, we have made a proposed amendment where we are recommending one, that the commission be chaired by the president, and the commission must be established in terms of the act, and the legal status of the commission must be, of course, clarified. And in the short term, 2 to 3 years after promulgation of the act, the commission will continue to exist in its current form. These are transitional clauses, and in that period, the commission will finalize, together with the department, the modalities for the establishment as for the listing as an independent entity, with the consultation with the National Treasury. And this modality will include, of course, all the requirements as per PFMA, the undertaking of the feasibility study and the business case, and ensuring that there is, of course, an approval and consent that will from Treasury that will be consistent with the PFMA. So in this regard, we are on the latter column, on the outer column, suggesting amendments for consideration to really give effect to the submissions that we have received. One is to indicate very clearly in the amendment that the Presidential Climate Commission, which exists in this act, when this act takes effect, will continue to exist. And then the second area is on 10.2, where the minister would ensure its continued existence and ensure compliant with the PFMA. And on clause 3 is once it is listed as an entity under the Public Finance Management Act, it will have a full legal capacity as a jurisdiction person that will, of course, be independent and impartial, of course, subjected to the Constitution, and continuing on the inclusion of the Commission will continue to have 30 members, and the appointment will, of course, be inclusive. We included the language including but not limited to civil society, business, just to make sure that it takes into consideration the call to include other relevant stakeholders. If you move to the next page, 5 on the top, and in that line, we, of course, there are empowering clauses where government representative must include relevant ministers who must be co-opted to the commission, and the commission, now we are addressing the 5-year period that has been raised in the consultation, that the commissioners must be appointed for a period of 5 years, renewable once. And the Presidential Commission will be chaired by the President, as it has been underscored, and the President must, and I think we have made adjustment because they were made, that it must appoint the Deputy Chair, and in the absence of the Deputy Chairperson, in the absence of the Chair, the Deputy will perform the Chairperson function, and the Commission will may determine its own procedure. So that was on clause 10 of the Presidential Climate Commission. On clause 11, I think there, of course, has been submissions around the unhappiness during the consultation with the drive to discontinue coal-fired power station in favor of green energy sources. And of course, the issue around jobs was coming very strongly, and there was, of course, a call that we need to be clearly defining what the objective or the primary functions of the commission is. And as indicated in that clause 11, we, of course, including that the commission would advise on the socio-economic matter related to the just transition, and the Presidential Commission may establish the committees to assist it in the performance of its function. I mean, the whole issue around the establishment of technical teams to ensure that the Commission's advice is scientific is also being taken into account, that the Commission would be able to establish technical working teams that will really enable it to provide the evidence-based advice. Clause 12, Chair and honorable members, it deals with the process of appointment of the commissioners. And I think one thing that was coming quite very strong in the consultation is how do we ensure that the process becomes transparent, and how do we ensure that the commission, the role of the commissioner is to provide, I think they were mentioning strategic and technical advice to the commission, and no person shall be appointed as a commissioner unless she or he is not a South African citizen. I think those issues were raised, and we make an attempt to address these issues on the recommended amendments for the committee's consideration, where on clause 12 we are saying that before appointing the commissioners, in terms of section 104, the president would issue a notice at least two nationally circulated newspapers, and this is to allow participation in the nomination of the commissioners, and that notice will therefore specify the period upon which the public will be given to make nomination. And furthermore, the role of the commissioners is also, we make proposition for a clause there where the role of the commissioners is to provide advance, of course, to the Presidential Climate Commission on the climate change response, mitigation and adaptation to the effect of climate change, towards, of course, the attainment of a just transition and low carbon economy. And we have made a provision that no person shall be appointed as a commissioner unless he or she is a South African citizen, and the commissioner who are not in the employment of the state are eligible for remuneration, and the remuneration of commissioners will be determined by the minister in consultation with the Minister of Finance. This is just to make sure that it's consistent and it is able to comply with the PFMA. There are new clauses that are being proposed as part of enhancing, of course, on clause 12, and one key comment was that the bill must be amended to provide for the appointment of the executive director to be the one that hit the administration function of the commission. And we are making proposition for consideration on the appointment of the executive director, so that it is clearly guided in the bill, where the minister would appoint a person with appropriate qualification, experience, and expertise, and as an executive director following a competitive recruitment process. And the executive director is therefore becoming the accounting authority who must perform the functions of the office in accordance with this act. And a person appointed as the executive director would hold an office for a period of 5 years, which is renewable once. And the terms and conditions will be determined by the minister and will include, of course, the salary, the allowance, benefit, and performance standards. And I think those clauses are really empowering towards the appointment of the executive director. There has been an issue around, which has been raised in the submissions, around the element of financial administration of the commission to ensure compliance with the Public Finance Management Act. And we have made new clauses that are aimed at really strengthening that element of ensuring accountability and compliance with the PFMA. And in this regard, on the financial administration, we have added the clauses where the Commission must comply with the provision of the PFMA, and the Commission must be funded by appropriation, of course, from Parliament for the purpose of to the departmental vote in terms of the PFMA, and they, of course, may receive money as a way of grant and donation, whether inside or outside the country, and those monies are going to use solemnly for the purpose of the commission, and they may not be used by the commission for any other purpose without a proper approval of Parliament. And the fundraising strategy contemplated shall provide that such fundings, amongst others, must be unconditional. That's where we look at grant funding without necessarily the conditions on it, and would not result into the conflict of interest for commission or commissioners, and must be disclosed in full in accordance with the Act. And all grant and donation shall be disclosed in an annual report, and all material in an itemized manner. So those are the financial elements that came for the commission. If we move further, I think in page 10, there has been submission that the commission must be able to provide report on in terms of section 11B, where the president may require the PCC to provide a report. And we have proposed, of course, some clauses to give that into effect to ensure accountability and reporting requirement be strengthened to ensure that the commission will be in a position to report. And it has been recommended that clauses relating to reporting by the commission would be reviewed for transparency and removing discretion, and to ensure accountability to both the minister and parliament. And this is particularly to clause 13, where the suggested amendment would read as follows. One, amongst others, the commission would submit the annual report to the minister on its activities, the performance of its function, including the implementation of its approved strategic plan. And the commission must annually, within 6 months after the year end, provide a financial statement, a report on the overall control of the commission administration, report on the financial statement and the audit report of the statement. And the commission must, of course, furnish the minister with such additional information, particularly as the minister may from time to time in writing require, in connection with the activities and the function of the commission should be in a position to provide that to the minister. And the minister must be able to table, of course, the reports of the commission, of course, within 15 days after receiving the report from the commission. And if the National Assembly is not then sitting within 15 days after the commencement of the next sitting, and the president may require the commission to provide a report on any advice, guidance it provides to the government in terms of Section 11 that focuses on the functions of the commission. And finally, the reports of the commission must be made available to the public by way of website, so that they can be accessible. On clause 14, I think this is the last clause under the Presidential Commission. And I think the key is to address the issue of the Presidential Commission to have its own secretariat. And in this regard, the bill which provides that the department is the secretariat was revised accordingly. If honorable members recall, the initial formation was that the department will be providing the secretariat to the commission. But on this clause, the revision proposed that the commission will have its own secretariat under the leadership of the executive director, and the executive director would be empowered to appoint the secretariat of the Presidential Climate Commission, of course, in consultation with the National Treasury to take into account all the compliance requirements that we stipulated in the earlier recommendations. And the Secretariat will be responsible for the management and of the administrative affairs of the Commission, which include, among other things, the day-to-day management, the preparations of meetings, and the communications and research of the Presidential Commission. So that those were the parts on the Presidential Commission. The next part then moves to clause 15, and the clause 15, it's under chapter 3 that start to deal with the climate change response for provinces and municipalities. And I think the key issue that is arising there is one to ensure that all the instruments that are being developed by both the MEC and the mayors and subsequently also the ministers as you move to clause 16, just to provide context. One, they must be published and they must be easily accessible to the public, and these include, among others, the climate change needs and response assessments, as well as the climate change implementation, climate change response plans. And this goes way to include even the adaptation strategies and the sector strategies. So the principle is they need to be published and they should be accessible to the public. And of course, there was also a call there for the time frames, reducing the time frames of particularly in terms of the reviews and the amendment from 5 years to 2 years. And we are of the view that on each and every time frame, we should be able, firstly, to qualify it in principle and say at least within that time frame. But we are acknowledging that every instrument of planning has to be published to allow accessibility. So from that principle, we therefore make a proposed amendment for consideration. One, accepting the issue of publishing of the instrument that should be standard. But we also want to suggest that where there is time frame, we should qualify and say at least within 1 year, and this is to really enable functionality at all the levels to achieve those areas. On this, the proposal is at least within 1 year of the publication of the strategy, the national adaptation strategy. There should be an undertaking of the needs and response assessment at the provinces, metropolitan and district. And this, just to emphasize, honorable members, is to ensure that there is a coherent alignment from national to sector department to provincial to local. That is why the years of development of these various instruments are staggered in such a way that they don't necessarily run parallel, where they will end up being contradictory, but there should be, sequence where the national department will develop, of course, the scenarios, will develop the plans, and that plan will be the basis to inform the sectors, will be the basis to inform the provinces, and will be a basis to inform even a local sphere to really avoid a status quo, but try to to bring coherence and alignment of the instruments. So from that point, we are acknowledging that there should be publications of every instrument. And when we move to the changes in clause 16, if we can move to the clause 16. On the clause 16, the focus was really the may and the must, where there is a strong sense and feeling that this should not be discretionary, and it was included as part of the proposed amendment that the bill, the minister must periodically review and amend the national adaptation objective, and the minister must periodically review and amend the scenarios as contemplated in the subsection 1. On clause 18, the issue again was the issue of using the must and the may, where the review of the adaptation strategy is concerned, and we have made a proposition of substituting the may to a must review and amend the adaptation strategy at least every 5 years. And the 5-year period, just to also underscore that, is to really allow an impact assessment of the implementation of the strategy, meaning that if a strategy is developed, we're allowing the implementation, and within a 5-year period, we'll be able to go and review. But again, the impact of climate change interventions as well often takes time. So if we're just going to review it a year or two, it might not really demonstrate a clear impact and where the adjustment might be required. Similarly, on the same clause, we're gonna include both at least within 1 year of the publication of the adaptation strategy, and we will, of course, in principle, include the issue of ensuring that these instruments the sector plans are really being published and enable access by the public with ease. We're moving to clause 20. On the clause 20, I think the focus of clause 20 is on the adaptation information and the synthesis of adaptation information. And the submission there was, this is the information where the minister would be able to synthesize this information, call by notice all the key role players to provide information. In the current format, it was saying information for the purposes of the National Climate Change Response White Paper. And there's a submission that the white paper is old and overly overarching. It will be important for this bill to say the synthesis and the tracking and would be on the basis of the fulfillment of the objective of this act. And this is the suggestion that has been made, that the minister would call for information, synthesize, and make sure that the public or everyone is informed of progress in relation to the implementation of this act, not the white paper. Excuse me. On clause 21, this clause was making a provision that until such time the greenhouse gas emission trajectory is published. The minister will be using Schedule 3. And if honorable members may recall, Schedule 3 is talking about the trajectory, the peak plateau decline, the targets that are contained into the policy, the white paper, and they are different, particularly in relation to the emission targets, to the one that contained into the NDC. And the submission here is to at least allow that, since that we have a clear process defined in the law where the minister would be able to revise the trajectory, the PPD, the peak plateau decline trajectory, because we have such clauses until such time as the minister publishes the new trajectory. The latest update into the NDC should serve as the trajectory, and we are acceding to that that submission, that until such time the minister publishes the national greenhouse emission trajectory, the latest update of the NDC should serve as the trajectory. Just to also but underscore that the latest in the NDC goes only up to 2030. If we may, so we're proposing the deletion of Schedule 3, which contained the old trajectory as in the policy, and we're putting in this new clause that the minister would use until such time it is published. The latest NDC would serve as the trajectory. On clause 21, the wording, I think they considered the wording around the sectoral emission targets as vague, and we largely around the wording where suggest that the emission target should be informed by relevant evidence-based and latest information regarding the total current and the projected amounts of the greenhouse gas emission in the Republic. The wording was just only saying be informed by the relevant evidence-based up to date information, but there is a suggestion that it's quite vague when you allocating the sets. We should be very clear that the allocation of the sectoral emission target will be informed by relevant evidence, latest information regarding the total current and the projected amount of the greenhouse gas emission in the Republic. So that is being also considered for revision. Similarly, on the sets, and I think there was just a comment that this should be allocated to all major emitting sectors. And we also proposed further text there to ensure that it's very clear, and the text that is being proposed is to say the minister must, within 1 year of the coming of operation of this act by notice, list the greenhouse gas emitting sectors and subsectors that are subject to sectoral emission target. And this list must appropriately reflect the greenhouse gas emission profile of the country. If we are to really address emissions, the list where the sectoral emission targets are going to be allocated must be reflecting appropriately the profile, the greenhouse gas emission profile in the country. And the minister may vary the list of the sectors when we go to clause 22. And I think the document there, the sectoral emission targets are plans and policies and measures that are in place in government to promote, of course, emission reduction or achievement of the emission reduction. And there is a submission that we should, the department should consider expansion plans and trajectories of different sectors within the country. And the proposal amendment on this is to ensure that we focus on the list that can vary the list and the subsectors that are subject to sectoral national emission profile as contained into the latest national greenhouse gas inventory performance against the international commitment. If you may go on clause 23, I think there was an issue around the second half of the sentence where it was reading as the minister must by notice publish a list of activities which emit one or more of the greenhouse gas listed in terms of subsection 1, which the minister reasonably believes cause or are likely to cause or exacerbate climate change. And there was a concern that this is not clear enough. And this has been adjusted to say the minister must, by notice in the Gazette, publish a list of activities which emit or has the potential to emit one or more greenhouse gases listed in terms of subsection 1. Similarly, on clause 22, I think there has been comments around the assumption that cumulative sectoral greenhouse gas emission are not equivalent to the national GHG emission trajectory. And of course, the response that we provided is the sectoral emission targets are actually meant to accumulate emission reductions, not emissions, because the sets are in the main focusing on emission reductions. And to clarify this point, we making a proposition for the adjustment to say the bill will be aligned with the national greenhouse gas emission trajectory, noting that the cumulative amount of the greenhouse gas emission reduction, which the sectoral emission target represent, ensure that the national greenhouse gas emission profile are kept within the national greenhouse gas emission trajectory. So this is just to really clarify very clearly that the set's main purpose is to reduce the emission and is to make sure that the emissions are kept within the trajectory. On clause 24, there is, of course, a submission around the guidance. This is in particular on the allocation of the carbon budget, where there's clear that a person whom the carbon budget has been allocated may apply for revision, and that revision will take into account circumstances. So there was a call to say we need to really clarify this. And we clarified it by indicating that the person whom the carbon budget has been allocated may apply for the revision or cancellation of the carbon budget under circumstances to be prescribed very clearly and in detail in the regulations, because this will be very detailed criteria and detailed elements that will have to be taken into account. Will include, among other things, the socio-economic elements. So we believe that this can be detailed clearly into the regulations so that there is clarity in terms of what those circumstances would be that would be considered. Clause 27, I think these are empowering clause on the regulations, to develop the regulations. And on this clause, honorable members, I think we have added the commission to the text with the view that the minister would be empowered to make regulations regarding or relating to the administration and the functioning of the commission. If there are finer details that would arise, they would be able to be accommodated into the regulation. It's just an empowering clause where we say, in relation to administration and operation of any committee or commission established in terms of this act, and to ensure the achievement of their purpose, the minister will be empowered to make such regulations. There has been a very big issues around the penalties, with a strong view that the penalties within the bill are very weak, and they might also, we're not imposing stronger penalties pertaining to no stronger penalties pertaining to non-compliance. So there has been a very strong submissions around that, and the issues of the exceedance of the carbon budget, that there is no real penalty for the exceedance of the carbon budget. So we then propose further revision taking into account, and this has been coming across by many stakeholders, on strengthening the penalty, the offenses and penalty clauses. And we've made proposals where would, of course, suggest that additional elements on the penalties be included. Firstly, we of course understand that the enforcement of the carbon budget will be covered in detail in the regulations, as there has been, of course, engagement with Treasury on this as well, and also indicating that also note that the compliance against the carbon budget and the regulatory framework would be clearly addressed in the regulations, and we of course need to also outline clearly that National Treasury will outline the carbon tax legislation, that carbon tax accounting mechanism shall be used to penalize the non-compliance against the carbon budget, and research work has been done between the DFFE and the National Treasury that shows that the carbon budget and carbon tax system has to work in an integrated way. And just to also underscore that on the administrative penalty, the department is developing an administrative penalty bill, which will apply to NEMA and CIMA. However, taking all that into account, we have made some proposition for consideration. That a person who commits an offense, and we have included some offenses, One is around the failure to provide data and information, sample material to the minister in relation to 2021. Clause 21 deals with the adaptation synthesis report, and where a person provides false or misleading data and information to 21, which deals with the synthesis report. It becomes a penalty where a person failed to submit the greenhouse gas mitigation plans. That becomes a penalty, and failure to comply with, of course, 24.6 and B, and failure to comply or contravene the notice that would have been provided in 1 on the synthetic greenhouse gas emission, and failure to comply with measures contemplated in 25.3, where it talks about the development of plans to address the phase down and the phase out of the synthetic greenhouse gases. And the person, of course, will be convicted of an offense in terms of subsection 1, is liable to a fine not exceeding 5 million. And this is a fine, a standard fine that is also within NEMA. On schedule 2, I think we can go up. So thank you. My battery is going. On schedule 2, section 27, there is submissions, particularly the schedule deals with those sectors that have to develop the sectoral adaptation plans. And on that, there has been submissions, particularly on the issue of the Department of Education, given the fact that when we have all these extreme events, it does to a greater extent affect education and affects schooling. So there has been a greater input around the inclusion of the Department of Education. And we've noted as well that the department, the functional area of tourism is not included, and it is also one of the functional area that get impacted by the effect of climate change. We included that. We proposed the inclusion of that in the schedule for consideration. Then we move to schedule 3. I think we have spoken about schedule 3 is the removal of schedule 3 completely to use the to use the current revised NDC and until such time that the minister objects. Areas where the nation by you, Honorable Part, just deal with the issues that have been raised. If we can, it's frozen on my side. It's not moving. I don't know if we are all still seeing schedule 3. Honorable members, am I still connected?
Yes, Mr. Amar, you are connected and the slides are moving up. So I'm not sure whether the problem is on your side.
It might seem It might seem so. Maybe let me try and also connect on my phone. My apologies. I could also see that it's the load shedding thing. I'm just quickly, oh, it's moving now. It's moving now. Yeah, no, thank you. Yeah, it's moving. Thank you, honorable members. On part B, these are the comments that have been raised. However, I'm sorry, I'm just setting up on the phone because I see my battery is dying on this side as well. Yeah, these are the oral submissions, and on these there are no proposed amendments. But we tried to just provide a summary on how we responded to some of these issues. The first one, honorable members, is around the issue of the IPCC, and I think there was a submission for us to consider defining the IPCC, and we were very clear that as far as the IPCC is concerned, it has not been used a lot within the bill, only when the subsector was defined, and we proposed that we should not be making amendments. And there was also the second issue around the greenhouse gas, the meaning of the greenhouse gases, and we are of the view that the definition is very clearly within the National Greenhouse Gases Regulation, which is aligned to the Air Quality Act, and we are not also proposing amendment on this. The definition of
Hey, the presenter's really breaking up on my side. I'm not sure.
Mr. Amaru.
And I think what meets the needs of the present generation without common, and we believe this has.
Mr. Amaru.
Honorable Chair.
We seem to have a challenge. You seem to have a challenge with your connection. You keep on breaking up. I know that you said you have a load shedding, but you are breaking up a lot. Can you just try to move a bit?
Can I try this?
Yeah,
can I try on the
can
phone?
hear you now. We can hear you now.
Yes. Oh, perfect. Thank you, Chair. I'm also trying on the phone now because I could realize that on the computer my network is a bit problematic. But Chair, I think we were on section B. This is where we are not proposing any amendments. Just to highlight the issues that came up. The issue that came up, the issue around the concept of national circumstances to not be left vague. I think we were very clear that when you're dealing with the issue around the carbon budget, and where either it's around the cancellation or the revision, the details will be clearly outlined within the regulations on what the circumstances are. And this would include quite a number of detailed issues. So we are not gonna be defining it, Chair, in the bill at current form. The issue around addition to organized labor, civil society, we have, of course, agreed that we included the relevant stakeholders in the bill that I've already mentioned. The issue around the definition of a person. If we may, so I think it's moving very slowly on your side. If we may go to 25, just to make sure, yeah. Again, let's move up. Let's move up to 25. On the person, I think I was on the person. The issue on the person, where there is a recommendation, Chair, to define the person, we say this is a CIMA, Specific Environmental Management Act, and the person is already clearly defined within the National Environmental Management Act. And there, of course, there was an issue around the proposed definition of the scope, 1 and 2 on the emissions as are set out below. This has to do with the emission where scope 1, of course, means the direct emission from relevant parties. Scope 2 means indirect emission from electricity purchased. This is the submission that has been received. And our response there is, of course, the proposed text. It's rather restrictive and will not allow flexibility in the future should we scope 2 emission be considered for the carbon budget. It will be rather restrictive. And if we can go up a bit, and the issue around the definition on sectoral emission targets definition of social partners. I think there was an input or a submission for us to consider the definition of social partners. And this is not supported, and I think I've made clear that we have included when we were dealing with the section that's gonna be we're gonna include the weighting of relevant stakeholders. And clarity regarding the definition of the listed activities has been raised. And in terms of the GHG emissions and their activities, and in relation to carbon budget and the national GHG inventory, and I think in our response, clearly the listed activities for the sectoral emission targets are highlighted in Schedule 1, and listed activities for carbon budget shall be listed in the carbon budget regulations. And this, I think, we believe that this would be addressing some of these comments. Revision of Section 2 on the objects of the Act, so that it begin with the principal object of transforming to an ecological sustainable society. And this is the submission that has been made. For example, in setting the follow to facilitate the rapid and just transition to an ecological sustainable society that emit less carbon into the atmosphere than the system. And we believe that the clause on the objectives already address, in essence, the issues of just transition, the issues of addressing the emission reduction, and the issues of adapting to the impact of climate change. We believe the object as they stand, they are very balanced and taking into account the various components of climate change response. There is also an issue around having to outline conflict resolution mechanisms to ensure that the objectives and the principle of the Act are realized. And we emphasize that this is a specific environmental management, and Chapter 4 on conflict resolutions will still apply like it applies to all other specific environmental management act. it can go up. Of course, on chapter 3, the issue on the importance that needs for sustained economic growth be incorporated in the principle. This is the comment that has been submitted. And in our response, we say the principle of ecological sustainable economies remains central to the bill, and this has been captured in the bill. And the principle, again, the other principle is the principle of participatory democracy, broadly in the context of environmental management that is being advocated, and say the bill does not adequately center the Constitution and the Bill of Rights, and the principle laid out in Section 3 of the bill should be made binding to all organs of state and must apply to decision-making matters of climate change impact. And we acknowledge the statement, but we want to underscore that the bill will be a specific environmental management, and the National Environmental Management Act principles will apply, and in particular the issue of Section 24 of the Constitution also apply. As such, these comments is, in our view, adequately covered. On clause 4, 5, and 6, since there are no direct comments there. On clause 7, the proposed section that organized labor, civil society, business may advise on the Republic on climate change response. I think we have dealt with very significantly when we were dealing with the Presidential Climate Commission, and a number of those adjustments were clear that because the argument here was there is no institutional mechanism for this bill, and we indicated clearly that the PCC is by itself an institutional mechanism. We have the provincial structures that the bill is empowering the provincial structures to address the issues of climate change. It's empowering the local government structures to address the issues of climate change. So as such, we believe that chapter 2 dealing with institutional mechanism really has gone into length to try and empower the different structures that operates under the Intergovernmental Relations Framework Act to deal with issues of climate change and to mainstream and actually elevate climate change to the apex structures of the province and the local sphere. Chapter 9, clause 9 and 8, I think there were submissions that touched to the provision for the membership representation of the traditional leaders from the provincial houses of traditional leaders, and the religious fraternity representation from the provincial interfaith council of South Africa. And we noted that participation in the intergovernmental forum and support structures established in terms of the intergovernmental relation framework, of course, would allow participation of the intergovernmental structures, and the composition of these structures are in essence regulated by the intergovernmental relation framework. So it might be difficult for us to start amending the Intergovernmental Relation Framework Act through this bill. There are submissions around clause 9 that should reconsider the municipality that cannot enforce the current legislation, and climate change will not get enforced. And I think on the enforcement, we're making an emphasis that the bill, once enacted into law, it's a SEMA, and all enforcement powers within the NEMA will apply. And we have, of course, we have a dedicated environmental enforcement inspectorate that will also continue to do its work, but we also have tried to make amends to the penalties and the compliance just to strengthen it a little bit in the bill. There are elements around the Provincial Forum on Climate Change, where there is a call for it to establish an intergovernmental technical structure in terms of the Section 30 of the Section 30 of the Intergovernmental Relations Framework Act. If there is a need for a formal technical structure, they must ensure sufficient expertise are available and so forth. And we of course, in our response, we are aligned with the IGRFA, the Intergovernmental Framework Act. And this act is using the word may, just to allow the local sphere to and the provincial sphere to make assessments and then establish the structures as the need arise. So it might be difficult to use something that would be contradictory in this bill when we are referring to the intergovernmental structures. There's concern around incorporating climate change forums within the previous intergovernmental forum and district intergovernmental forum, respectively, may not ensure that stipulated climate change response are sufficiently prioritized. And I think this is one of the key strategic focus of the bill, to really mainstream climate change and push for its prioritization by using even the existing mechanism to can address climate change in a coherent manner at that level. We thought we should underscore that. And on 10 to 15, I think we have dealt with this substantively. 10 is around the Presidential Commission. 15 was around the climate change response in the provinces and municipalities. We've dealt with when we were dealing with the amendments. Similarly, on 16 to 26, we have dealt with that part when we were dealing on the amendments. If we move to 27, there is submissions around the rebates, and we are indicating very clearly that the rebates are inherently included into the incentives, where the minister has the powers is empowered to develop regulations. The issues of rebates within the incentive focus would be addressed there without necessarily having to add a specific clause on the rebates. The clause that speaks to, there should be a clause that speaks to monitoring, enforcement, reporting, compliance, non-compliance. We are indicating that this has been addressed, and we have dealt with some of these issues do exist. The bill has a provision under clause 828 that will make consultation with communities and local structures compulsory before finalizing regulations. And clause 28 need to include provision of the mandate of public inputs. And I think this is the whole issue around the consultation when the minister, the MEC, and the mayor are making administrative decisions, making regulations, and making developing planning instruments. And we're very clear that this indeed is consistent with the provision of the PAJA and NEMA and all other CIMAs. There are clauses that deal with the consultations where when these decisions are made, there would be a proper consultation, either by notice or by gazette, or which are very clearly articulated in the bill as well. Yeah, the government, I think there's clause 29 there. They want us to regulate that the government must have dedicated social media platforms that use to communicate important messages. We note this, but we believe that the clauses that we have are consistent with NEMA and all other CMAs, where the government decision must be communicated by notice. Current, I mean, the department use different platforms, be it the website, to share some of the messages. We believe that this is consistent and there's no need to really regulate the use of social media through this bill. Participation is insufficient. I think these are some of the inputs that came to say the public participations are insufficient, and again they're pushing very hard for the National Gazette is really visited by the majority of citizens. And we noted the submission, but in terms of regulations, regulating this public participation, we take cue from PAJA and NEMA and all other CMAs. We are not going to be able to provide any contradictory. However, we also acknowledge that other platforms are still in use. They might not be regulated, the use of websites and even social media, but they are not really regulated, but they are communications that goes to such. The issue around the minister and the mayors to respond to an objection to exercise powers emanating from this bill. This means that public consent can simply be ignored. I think here the submission is to say if there is an objection, then the minister or the mayor should not carry out their administrative responsibility due to that, due to the objection. And we say the minister is obliged to consider public comment and objection. Comment and respond report is developed for all published notices and is a public document where the public will be able to see how the minister, the mayors, and the NEC have responded to the issues that have been raised. The clause should, I think, clause 31, as there's no comment on 30. The bill is silent on the fundamental transparency, access to information. And I think just to underscore the issue of information and access is coming quite a lot. I mean, our focus really is not to develop a new regime other than the existing regime on access to information following PAJA, following PAIA and POPIA. So we are not in a position through the bill to develop a new regime for access to public information. And clause 33, I think the submission around the subsection to empower the minister of the NEC not to consider an appeal from a person that has outstanding carbon tax payments. And our response is the carbon tax and its payment is an emission accounting issue. And the Carbon Tax Act already deals with transgression and non-compliance with respect to carbon tax administrative and performance procedure. It is unclear whether on sectoral role players, private sector and affected person will be able to give inputs to appeal and determination of sectoral and sub-sectoral emission targets. There's a comment that has been raised. And the sets, once developed, shall be published for public comment, and that process will, of course, allow for all societal actors to engage with the SADS, and appeal will be processed, of course, in terms of the NEMA. And on section 34, there was...
Mr. Amaru.
Yes, ma'am.
Sorry. Before you go to you proceed to close 34, can I request that we get a 5-minute break so that we can allow members and colleagues to just grab a glass of water? Just 5-minute break, honorable members. Can we take that break?
Thank you.
Honorable members?
Yes, I'm happy with that, Chair.
Yeah, 5-minute break. Yeah, okay. Then we will proceed with clause 34. Thank you.
Recording stopped. Recording in progress.
Colleagues, are we back?
We're back, Honorable Gancho, must we say, chairperson.
Thank you, Honorable Webb. Mr. Amaru, you may proceed. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I will start, Chair, with clause 34, page 35. There was submission around the inclusion of transitional arrangements that recognize substantive revision of sector implementation plans, which may require to be reworked. And I think we're saying there's not really need required for this, as we have already recognized, the fact that we would be working with the sector. So there's no really need for that transitional elements. The submissions around the agency, saying the bill needs to stress the agency, and we of course acknowledge the view, but we need to indicate that whether it's basis, whether it's also on the adaptation side, a number of instruments are ongoing for implementation. That is how urgent this matters is, and the bill will be giving all these instruments a legal status and allowing further alignment and ensure that there is coherent implementation. So we are acknowledging that. The Act should focus on inspiring vision. I think they even suggested to rename it a Climate Stability Bill. We believe that we retain the same name of the Climate Change Bill, addressing all the other components of both mitigation and adaptation. Honorable Chair, Part C, these are comments that were, whether we call them service delivery, but they were related to other departments, municipalities, and parliament, and we can be guided on how best to deal with, because we believe that the PC, the Portfolio Committee Secretariat has also outlined such maybe a very common way of dealing with will be important, whether it's the letters. We can be guided on how best. We thought that these submissions we will note and transmit to relevant sector departments as necessary. But I think we can get further guidance on this. But there were comments that relate to improvement of road conditions, which are linked to improvement of the economic opportunities and access to emergency services in the municipalities. The issue around the enforcement of addressing illegal dumping also has been raised, and the issue around addressing the substance abuse crime amongst the young people and the issue of promoting job creation has been raised. I'm just going to highlight this. In terms of the approach, I guess we will be guided on what will be the coherent approach, both from the Secretariat and ourselves, on how to address and send to the relevant department. The issues around the recruitment of officers in the local environmental forums has been raised. And those which are in-house, the issues around the existing EPWP jobs, that the program should be expanded to create even more jobs. The refuse collection has been raised in most public hearings. The provincial stakeholders get ignored when they are declaring the disaster management in the areas. I think this has been raised. Generally poor waste management, implementation of bylaws, and the stopping of the land invasion has been raised, and addressing the issues of water pollution, the issues around immediate interventions after climate-related disasters. So if there is a disaster that is happening, there should really be immediate interventions by the stakeholders has been raised. The issue around the rehabilitation of abandoned mines and the risks that they cause to health, safety, and the environment has also been raised and highlighted. Uncontrolled sand mining along the riverbanks has been raised, as well as key issues. The shift towards plant-rich food production and consumption has been raised as one of the areas that needs to be considered to also drive the reduction of meat consumption, that is reducing intervening through a behavioral change approach. The just transition in the livestock sector, shift from industrial animal farming has been raised. The issues around the Department of Agriculture hinders agricultural growth by not providing land support or giving allocated funds to farmers. Agriculture, together with DFFU, should support farmers in the transition. Sustainable farming practices has been raised, and some of these issues, from the implementation point of view, where there's collaboration with other sectors, we can also highlight the work that is ongoing. There's a general lack of support to emerging farmers and traditional leaders, and local municipality stifle development. The issue of developing climate support program to help farmers affected by change. The issue around promoting gender mainstreaming into environmental decision making has been raised, and in this regard, I think the submission from our side is the principle is also captured in the bill around the vulnerable community, which includes the women, youth, and children. We have included that aspect where it touches a bit on the bill. We are able to reflect how we introduce, we have captured it. Recognition of this disproportionate effect of climate change-induced disasters to women and children, and further they are calling for the inclusion of the lesbian, gay, bisexual, and the LGBTQI plus persons, and just to underscore, the bill really include women, include children as part of those that are vulnerable. And we should work with the science, innovation, and basic education, community-based, to improve awareness. That has been noted. There should be awareness programs, and I think the issue of awareness program has come both even from the written submission, that we need to enhance and improve on the awareness program. And as we have noted as the department, we will be engaging with the relevant sectors to really ramp up on the awareness. Of course, the issue around the awareness to encourage planting of indigenous trees has also been raised. The municipality should promote the planting of spec boom trees, request that elements of free, prior, informed consent be built in the bill, and the issue of traditional leaders, which are key stakeholders to the land, will be affected by climate change, and the bill must be referred to the National House of National Leadership. And just to indicate that the state law advisors is, of course, as responsible for the certification of the bill. Their opinion concluded that this is not necessarily need to be referred to the traditional and the cohesion leaders in terms of section 39, 1A, I of the Traditional and the Cohesion Act. But the point has been noted. Copies of the bill were received late. There was insufficient time to go through it. There was poor mobilization on the ground. The bill is technical and difficult to understand. There should be workshops that has to be addressed to make it easy to understand. Some attendees raised concern that copies of the bill were only available to them at the venue. The consultation are not inclusive as people with disability were left out. Copies of the bill were not available in Afrikaans, and the hearing should be held widely across the country so that all communities, especially the marginalized and the vulnerable, have a voice to have a voice. Their voice should be heard, and transport for marginal communities should be organized to attend the hearing. So this is a summary, Honorable Chair, of some of the issues that have been raised. And I think my last comment would say, given the volume and the time that we have to really push hard to put these, I think we might consider just editorial as we go along, where we are able to pick up some editorial issues, just for the document to read well. We would really appreciate if we can look at those editorial issues. But Chair, I submit to you through you, DG. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Amaro. Thank you very much. Did you not have anything to add? Are you fine?
Chairperson, I am covered and I'm okay. This is the submission we've prepared as a department. Thank you.
No, thank you, DG. Honorable members, here's the presentation, a lengthy one. Can I get hands? Can I see hands? If there's people who wants clarity seeking questions or wants to make wants to have a bite on this presentation, can I see hands? Hopefully I will be able to see hands because I have to change my gadget. Colleagues?
Honorable Winkler?
Actually, I've raised my hand.
Okay, Honorable Winkler, I only see your hand. Yes, you can chip in.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to the department for the presentation. I just have a few questions of clarity. With regards to clause 21 and 22, when we talk about sectoral emission targets, and also the fact that the minister may vary these, the list of sectors and the subsectors targets, it doesn't make any mention of how these are aligned to the Paris Agreement commitments, and neither to the objectives of the IPCC in terms of limiting our warming to below 2 degrees and 1.5 degrees Celsius by 2050. And also doesn't say how it's aligned with the net zero for 2050. And whether this is going to be used as a reference point when plotting these targets for the different sectors. Then just with regard to the Presidential Climate Commission, there had been a suggestion from, I think, our inputs in our climate change hearings that there needs to be the establishment of a separate scientific body to inform the work of the PCC. And this is also necessary because climate change affects, every single facet of government, and the implementation of our plans and our climate response is cross-cutting again through government. And so it shouldn't ideally just reside in the Department or Portfolio of Environmental Affairs. Because it is a whole of society issue, it requires a whole of government response. And so, as I said, there needs to be, or there was a suggestion that there's a separate body, like an executive body, that is formulated, which can then monitor and oversee the work of the whole of government in terms of its climate change response. So there's two things there: the formation of the scientific body to inform the PCC, so that any decisions that are made are taken with the best scientific evidence and with experts in the field. And then also the fact that climate change responses are not solely the responsibility of the Department of Environmental Affairs, and actually need a coordinated oversight approach through an executive body that's created separately. And then with regards to clause 32 with penalties and offences, it says that in terms of the national carbon budgets and the mitigation plans, there are penalties and administrative penalties, for example, if one does not submit a mitigation plan. But what about if a person or an entity fails to implement the plan, or if they fail to report on the plan at requested intervals? So that wasn't made mention of there. Then with regard to transparency, in clause 31, there was mention of PIA and POPI Act and how, interested parties and South Africans in general can request this information through those formalized processes. But as we know, requesting information via PIA can be a very arduous and bureaucratic procedure. And not only that, the request can eventually be declined. Now, there's a certain level of transparency and accountability that needs to take place because of the impact this has on South Africans in general. And so I think that every South African has a right to that data and that information, and to make them jump through these bureaucratic hurdles in order to get this information that is necessary, for us to implement our climate response and strategy, I think needs to be looked at. And this was brought up, I think, on numerous occasions by various stakeholders as well. In terms of clause 8 and 9, I think in chapter B, there was a request on the Provincial Forum on Climate Change, that there also was an intergovernmental technical structural committee. Now, because the success of the climate change bill and its implementation actually requires that provinces and municipalities are able to effectively implement, they can't do that without the necessary technical expertise and capacity building. So when we say that this has already been sort of incorporated in other means, I feel it's a bit disjointed. And how on earth are we going to then enforce provisions of this bill at various levels of government if there is not a body that deals with technical capacity? So those are just the clauses that I've made note of. And then just more generally speaking, yes, just if there could be some elaboration on how there is a plan to, as I say, capacitate and empower the different organs of state, and give them the support and the oversight to ensure that they are implementing the climate response. Okay, thank you. That's all from me.
Thank you, Honorable Winkler. I only see your hand. I assume that members are covered by the presentation. Did you and your team, can you respond to the questions that were raised by Honorable Winkler?
Thank you, Chairperson, and thank you for the questions that have been raised. I'm going to allow the presenter and the DDG to respond to the matters, and there are some that I will come back and address, Chair, after the team has responded. DDG, can you then respond? And Mr. Ramau?
Thank you, DG. I would propose that the questions around the issues of SEDS be answered by our mitigation experts, Chongi, and those who would also go together with the issues around the penalties. And on the issues of the technical support to the provinces, maybe Mr. Amaru can also highlight some of the work that we are doing there and the difficulties of having this in the bill. But the other issues that were raised, for example, the issue of coming up with an executive body to oversee the work of the PCC, I think those are the issues that we'll need to give consideration to, because at this point in time, we have not really engaged on those sort of issues. Thank you, DG. With your permission, perhaps Mr. Amaru and Mr. Jogi could answer specific questions around the sets. Thanks.
Yes, thank you, Maisela. Good day, Chair and members, and also thanks, DG. On the specific question asked by Honorable Winkler on the sets, I think the issue is that the sets themselves, they are instruments that are meant to support the implementation and adherence to our targets as prescribed by the Paris Agreement. So if one looks at the National Greenhouse Gas Emissions Trajectory provisions in 21.3. So as Mr. Amaru indicated earlier on, the proposal is to change that text so that the national trajectory refers to the current NDC targets that have been set. Now, those NDC targets are actually compatible with both the 2-degree goal in terms of the Paris Agreement, as well as the 1.5-degree goal in terms of what the latest IPCC report, produced in terms of keeping within 1.5 degrees. So the sectoral emission targets will be the instruments that will be used to ensure that we comply with those. Hence, those two aspects in terms of being in adherence to Paris Agreement and the IPCC report special report on 1.5 degrees is actually inherently embedded in that, Chair. And then in terms of the issue of compliance and penalties, particularly in relation to the mitigation plans. One will recall that the mitigation plans are actually meant to enforce the implementation or support the implementation of carbon budgets. So because the idea is that as you implement your mitigation plans, you will be reducing your emissions and therefore keeping within your carbon budget. So those two instruments are actually linked. They are not separate. In fact, the regulations that we will develop or in the process of developing are actually meant to address both instruments to the extent that the mitigation plans are helping for companies to meet their carbon budget. So we are avoiding, in terms of issues of compliance on the mitigation plan, we're avoiding the double penalty aspect. However, as Honorable Winkler mentioned, the issue of administrative penalties are actually will be addressed in the regulations, including, as Honorable Winkler indicated, the issue of not reporting. So because that becomes an administrative aspect of non-compliance and will have to be dealt with in the regulations. I hope that answers, Honorable Chair. Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank
now,
you, Mr. Amar, over to you.
Okay, thank you, Chair. And maybe just to underscore also from Joingi, the reason why we did not put the Paris Agreement as in the name of the international instrument is because this name do change over regime. And if we put it explicitly as Paris Agreement, it will therefore mean that when the Paris Agreement, when the next cycle of an instrument come and with a different name, you will need to go back to the law to amend it to include that name. However, John is right that all the instruments are aligned with the commitment to the international commitment that we've made. And that spirit is also expressed clearly in the preamble in terms of our commitment to the international response. On the issue around, I think I would start on the issue around the executive body. Honorable members, if you may recall, the initial bill was having an interministerial committee, and in the discussions, it was indicated that the current executive forums, whether the normal government structures would apply, cabinet clusters would apply in terms of the implementation of this program, other than having a standing interministerial committee within the bill itself. And if the need arises for such establishment, it can always be established, but it should not be a standing interministerial committee established in the bill. The issue around a scientific body, I think it has, of course, been raised, but in the clause, it was clear that the Presidential Commission is empowered to establish technical committees with different expertise to can enable it to ensure that its advisory is scientific based. And I think that was the response in terms of establishing another separate scientific body, rather have an empowering clauses that enable the technical work to be carried out. The issue around the technical committees in the province, as far as the institutional mechanism exists, there is a clear clause. I think it's 8.4 and 9.4, where within the municipal forum on climate change may establish an intergovernmental technical support structure at the local level. And this can also, a provincial forum may also establish a technical support structure. So that empowering clause do exist for the provinces and the local sphere to establish such technical structure to support the implementation of the work. There's issues around the plans to empower and capacitate the different organs of state. We have been supporting the sectors, we have been supporting the provinces and as well as the local sphere to develop the various instruments, the planning instruments, and we will continue to do that. And I think with the bill, it will be more empowering because now the climate change matter will now be carried weight, will not be viewed as a non-mandated activity or a non-mandated function. So we will continue to work with them to support the development of the various instruments that are required by the bill. And I think this is one of the reasons why the timeline are structured in such a way that there would be coherence, alignment, and support with these structures. And we have been doing that, Chair, just to indicate that we have covered all the 9 provinces in supporting them to develop their adaptation response plan. We have covered all the districts in developing their response plan. So that is the work that will be ongoing, just to support. And over and above that, we do a lot of capacitation for them from the technical element of climate change so that they can really build that capacity within the sphere of operation. That will be an ongoing task. I've covered the provincial structure and the technical team. I think the issue of transparency, I'm going to allow our colleagues from legal to come in here the issue around access to information. And I think the key has been that Kaya and Paja are not adequate, but I would allow colleagues to come in here to avoid a situation where we develop a different regime to access of information that will be in contradiction with the laws that govern access to this information. Maybe so you can address this in detail. Thank you, Chair. And if we can allow Sibusiso to address this, and back to you, DG.
Thank you, Mr. Amaru. Sibusiso.
No, thank you, Chair, and good morning, honorable members, DG and colleagues. No, from my side, maybe I may start. I wanted to clarify the issue of penalties. To say the point raised on penalties by Honorable Winkler is in fact addressed in the proposed amendments to clause 32 of the bill. If you look at clause 32, 1D. 1D addresses the aspect of failure to implement the plan. So it's not just about the offense is not just a failure to prepare and submit the plan, but also failure to comply and implement the plan. So we've covered that in the proposed amendments to clause 32. But then I noted Jongi's comments, and we may need to then refine the wording in consultation with the state law advisor to ensure that the clause 32 is aligned to clause 27, the regulations making provision. Chair, the proposed wording is draft wording at this stage. They will still work with the state law advisors to make sure that there is proper alignment as we go towards development of the A list. Then on the issue of access to information, we really double-checked the current proposal in the bill against PAJA and NEMA and the AWAS and the SIMAs. And the current wording is fully aligned with PAJA and NEMA and the SIMAs in our view. Of course, the submissions are proposing that let's do more than what the law provides. But as Joe mentioned, we cannot really provide a separate regime from what is currently provided for in PAJA and in particular the Constitution. But it may be the public needs to be educated about the PAYA, PAJA, and those kind of laws, because, for example, with PAYA, it's not as if all information is confidential or is protected, but there is information within PAYA that is generally or readily available. Government must avail certain information upfront without any need for an application. So there is certain processes that must be followed, of course, but there is information that is generally readily available. And most of the information that we talk about here in the bill is information that is that should be readily available without a need for a specific application. So maybe we may need to educate the public about the meaning of PAYA and the associated processes. But in general, information should be government information should be generally available and readily available. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Kobes. DG, I assume that you have covered all the questions. Or do you still want to say something?
Yes, Chairperson, I think all the questions raised have been covered. But just to emphasize also, I think Honorable Winkler raises critical points in ensuring that the PCC remains independent. And you would have noted in our response that clause 10, we have made a proposed amendment in ensuring that the PCC is established as a legal as a statutory body that has the full legal capacity and will ensure independence and impartiality for then the whole of government to be able then to be held accountable and respond to the plans and all the work that the PCC would be putting through. So that is emphasized, and it is a change from the original bill, taking into account the comments that we received where it was originally just an advisory body that has been enhanced. And maybe also to emphasize on the point of the support, the capacity at provincial and municipal level. The bill is even empowering in terms of setting up those technical support structures, but also as national, we have a legal obligation in terms of the Systems Act 154 to support local government sphere. And the team has already indicated that there are programs where we are working very closely, and to ensure success of this implementation of this bill, we will definitely have to work very closely with the municipality and support those technical support structures, which are highlighted as empowering the municipal space. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you, DG. Honorable Winkler, I see that your hand is up. Do you have a follow-up question?
Yes, please, Chair. So,
Okay.
thank you. Just to refer back, in terms of the legislation, you say that provinces or local municipalities may enlist the support of some a technical task team, for example. And so I am worried about the may part, and I think this is also highlighted many times in your response document about strengthening the may to the must. And you had said that there obviously are legal challenges around that. But I do worry about saying that these provincial and local structures may appoint technical task teams when we know, in fact, it is a necessity to employ these task teams, because the local government at the moment is struggling in its basic core mandate, which is service delivery. Now you're adding another layer of planning climate change response, where we know already that there is a lack of technical know-how at a local level. So is there any way, and perhaps from a legal standing, to make a provision in the bill that it is mandatory for local governments to or implement or adopt a technical task team to assist with capacitation and expertise at the local level? So that is the first one I just wanted to get some clarity on. And then in terms of the Presidential Climate Commission, thank you. It's well noted about, ensuring that, in fact, in our statutory body, but also, again, it says that the PCC may establish a technical committee. Now, because the work of the committee is so important and it needs to be informed by the best and the latest science and expertise, again, the may should be that, in fact, the PCC must establish a scientific advisory or technical committee to inform its decision-making, so that it's not just political decision-making, but again, informed by the right science. In terms of the PIA and POPI, you said that there is information that should be readily available when it comes from government, but when it comes to certain sectoral, plans and how far they are in meeting those commitments, how would the access to information then be acquired? Because that's probably where the POPI and PIA are going to become cumbersome to get that data. And so should it not be incumbent upon perhaps companies or entities to publish the data and make it publicly available, because it is in the public interest, for example? So just some clarity on those. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Winkler. DG? and your team, can you respond?
Thank you, Chairperson. Can I request the legal team to respond, especially on the first may and must, and also on the issues around enforcement of PAIA and POPI, and also improvement on transparency. And then the team, Chloe, you will deal with the technical team as also constituted in the proposal that we're putting forward. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you, DG. Who will be the first one to respond?
Busiso from legal, or maybe, yeah, I think it's Busiso.
Okay, no, thank you to DG and the chair. I think Chloe addressed the issue of the Intergovernmental Relations Framework Act in Part B of his presentation, where we were saying that act uses the wording may. It says the local government may set up those structures, technical structures. So our response was then that we cannot, through the bill, change the wording in that act to be more peremptory, to say must, because then it means if we are saying must in the climate change bill, will then be in contra, the laws will conflict in that respect. So the ideal way is to then effect amendments in that legislation if the proposal is for appointment of those technical structures to be mandatory. But in our view, we cannot really change that act through the climate change bill. Maybe Parliament can then initiate the process of making the necessary amendments to the Intergovernmental Relations Framework, or the relevant department can make those amendments to make sure that there is alignment. And but all we're doing is just to align the bill with the existing legal frameworks and not to cause contradictions. Then on the creation of a technical committee by the PCC, there is a clause, I think it's 10, I can't get to the clause now, where we're saying we are enabling the commission to set up committees and subcommittees. Maybe on that specific clause, then we may consider changing the wording may to must, such that it's compulsory for the PCC once it's properly set up to then establish those subcommittees to assist to then assist it to undertake its work. So on that one, I think it's something that we may consider to change the may to must. Then on the PAIA considerations, I think I did mention that with government, information is generally and readily available. That's why in certain clauses, as Flo presented, we were inserting wording that minister must not just prepare the plans, or the relevant authorities must not just prepare the plans, but must make sure that those are published and are available to everyone. Then with respect to sectoral emission targets, I think there's also a requirement that the necessary publications must be made. Those plans, strategies must be availed to the public. Of course, PAIA has restrictions in that you cannot disclose confidential information that is specific to certain private persons or companies. And if you want access to that information, then you may have to get the prior consent from that specific information holder. Maybe that's the process that must be followed, but from the government perspective, information should be readily available and publicized. Thank you, Chair and TG.
Thank you, Mr. Kobese. The second person who's going to respond.
Chair, I think the head of legal, DDG Benjamin, has her hand up. Can I request that she be allowed to also provide some responses? Thank you.
Thank you very much, DG. Good day, honorable members and chair, as well as DG. With regard to, just to expand on Sibusisi's clarification with regard to PAIA. So PAIA, in terms of section 15, makes provision for an entity to have a list of information that is voluntarily disclosed and automatically available. And as Sibusisa has indicated, there is provision for certain information that will be provided to this, the PCC, that will be included in that list. So the section 15 list will detail the information that will be readily available and published. So it will be in terms and aligned with PAIA, which makes provision for entities to do that. So when information has been submitted, whoever submits it and companies and entities that submit this information will be made aware that this information will be part of that list of automatically available information. Thank you, DG. I hope that clarifies that.
There's also a question, the chat box. Can you also respond to that? Honorable Winkler wrote in the chat box.
Chair, Chair, can I proceed?
Yes, you can.
So as I've indicated, in that list, we will detail the information that will be automatically available. We will have to ensure that PAJA requirements are met with regard to information that's not on that section 15 list. So we will have to look at, in terms of PAIA, there's certain information, and in terms of POPIA, to protect certain personal information, as well as certain commercially sensitive information. So in data that is provided by the companies that are submitted will have to be checked to see if that information will be part of the automatically available information. And I think it will be imperative for the companies themselves to detail what information they would consider to be either commercially sensitive. And in any event, PAIA makes provision to assess whether that is in fact commercially sensitive, and still allows the entity to disclose information without compromising certain companies' sensitive information, Chair. I hope that addresses that.
Thank you. Thank you so much, ma'am. DG, you want to have a bite, or you are covered with the responses? You don't want to say anything?
Thank you, Chair. I am covered in terms of the responses, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, DG. Honorable members, I do not see hands from your side. Oh, I see Honorable Winkler. This is your show today, Honorable Winkler. I see your hand.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry, I didn't make. I was hoping other people would raise their hand. So
I see also Honorable Weber. Yeah, Honorable Weber is going to follow you.
Thank you. So just in terms of how data is made available, so when entities are reporting, and you call it the Section 15 list, that goes to the Presidential Climate Commission, what about that information being actually made available to the public without having to request it? So, for example, a website or on the DFFE's webpage, where interested members of the public can actually follow the sectoral emission targets. They can follow the climate mitigation plans to see how far we are along in terms of our progress, if we're on track to meeting our climate commitments, for example. why is it not possible to have that information displayed in a public and transparent manner, since, as again I said, it is something of public interest? Or can it only be provided to the PCC, and why? Why can't we make this information publicly available if it's already going to the PCC and will be made available if requested? Thank you.
Honorable Weber, I see that you've lowered your hand. Are you covered by Honorable Winkler?
Chairperson, I'm actually traveling. Can you hear me?
Yes, I wanted to take your question as well so that they can respond to both you and Honorable Winkler.
Thank you, Chair. I appreciate it. Yes, I actually want to just have a small comment on a follow-up from Honorable Winkler and the response that the legal team gave to the first point of the MAST and the MAE regarding the municipalities' involvement in technical teams. And I accept what the legal team says, but it is, she has emphasized it. If the legal team can help in a way to find correct wording that these teams are actually be part of the responsibilities of the municipality. I understand the explanation of its amendment and other acts and everything, but part of this bill is to emphasize the importance of climate change and to put things in place to work. And one of the solutions, if you can call it like that, from the department side into this climate change bill is that a lot of the responsibilities go to the municipality. But it doesn't help if we give the responsibility to the municipality, but it cannot be enforced because it may happen. So I'm just requesting, I'm not sure if Honorable Winkler is with me on this and if I make sense. Is there a different way of wording or a different way that we can ensure that this happens? Otherwise, the change of this specific one that we want technical teams in the municipalities and every municipality is not going to be effective, and we will not move on from where we are now. So I'm just requesting if there might be a different way of putting this in enabling us, the municipalities will be responsible for this technical teams. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Weber. DG and your team.
Thank you, Chairperson, and thank you to the members for these further clarity issues. I'm going to request our head of legal to respond to these matters, but also propose, Chairperson, that these are also some of the matters that can be considered as part of the parliamentary legal team processing some of the work that we have done together with our team, just to see on how best these matters can be dealt with, especially the may and must, and where we should not necessarily contradict other legislative framework that exists. But let me allow the head of legal to respond, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, DG. DG, I agree. We will look at the wording in terms of, I think we have taken note that it is quite critical and crucial that there is technical expertise available at the local municipalities, and we have taken note of it, and we will look at that to look at how that issue can be addressed without causing any conflict with any other legislation. I just wanted to clarify with regard to the Section 15 list that is normally published by public entities. What it does is it stipulates information that is voluntarily or automatically available, which means that you don't have to follow a prior process to request it. And if that information is already in the public domain, it should be, and that is the information that in terms of the commission will look at in terms of what will be published. So it's not information that if it's readily and it should be publicly available, it should be accessible to the public without following a prior process. the PIA list merely stipulates what kind of information would be readily available without having to go through a PIA request, DG. Sorry, Honorable Chair and members. I hope that provides the clarification. Thank you, DG.
Thank you very much, colleagues. I don't see any hands from our side, and I think that the team, with the DG and the team, they have covered all the questions that were posed or raised by the members. I think we have reached the conclusion of our meeting. Let me take this opportunity and thank
The person. Sorry to
Oh.
interject. Honorable Singh's hand is up.
Is it? Oh, sorry. I did not see it. Honorable Singh, my apologies. I did not see your hand. Honorable Singh? Honorable Singh? I believe he was traveling. Maybe he's got a challenge of network. Honorable Singh? Colleagues, can you hear me?
Yes,
Sorry,
Chairperson.
Chairperson. Sorry, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you now, Honorable
I'm
Singh.
so sorry.
Sorry, I
I've
did
been
not see your
traveling.
hand.
No, I don't blame you. You blame me. I'm at fault here because I've been traveling and cutting off and things like that. I just wanted to ask one general question about the financial impact. Has the department looked at the financial impact, and can they share that with us at some stage? Because, you know, the comments I'm getting from certain people, it's well and good to have legislation, regulation, requesting districts, municipalities to do certain things and leave it at their level. But has the financial impact of ensuring that this bill can be implemented been calculated at any stage? Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Singh. DG, and can you also respond to the chat, the message in the chat box?
Let me just. I'm just.
DG?
Thank you, Chairperson. I will request the team to respond to the message in the chat box. I think it's about publication of the information, which is being requested to be clarified. I think the question that Honorable Singh is raising is very critical. And as we were in the process of also these public consultation and the work that has been done thus far around climate change and its impact, the issue of resourcing and also ensuring that there's adequate resources in as far as dealing with these matters has been top on the agenda. And one of the critical aspects is that we obviously would not have done a detailed analysis in terms of the implication of implementation of this bill. However, we have been communicating and discussing with National Treasury on how best we can be in a position to ensure that this bill is adequately funded. Obviously, recognizing some of the fiscal constraints that exist, and there was then also the element of ensuring that we look into other resource mobilization mechanism in terms of some of the funds that exist. And I think the DDG can be in a position to talk to those aspects. But I think the point that is being raised is a point that has been occupying us in ensuring that we do and provide for adequate resources, and we do secure other alternative resources given the constraints that we currently have in our fiscus. But there isn't any detailed work that we can provide at this point. However, I think as the work develops and we can be in a position to indicate on how some of these programs are being resourced to, give effect the implementation of the bill, but also mitigation and adaptation of the climate change as a whole, Chair. I don't know whether the DDG would want to add on that and also on the issues that have been raised on the chat. Thank you so much, Chairperson.
Thank you, DG. DDG, you want to add?
Yes, yeah, thank you, Chair. And nothing to add to what DG has said, except also to indicate that the question from Honorable Sen goes both ways, because you would recall that the municipalities and provinces have also been asking for this bill because currently the challenges that they have when it comes to implementation of the plans that we help them to develop is that is seen as something that is not mandated. So this would then help them in a way to make it a mandated activity. So the question goes both ways. Thank you.
Thank you, DDG. Can the question in the chat box be responded to?
Thank you, Chair. DDG Benderman here. With regard to exactly what information will be published on the website for public consumption, I don't think at this stage we would be able to indicate that. I think the PCC will have to look at and come up with that list of, that Section 15 list of information that will be readily and publicly made available. Without having to follow a prior process. So at this stage, I am not clear on what all information would be published, and it is something that will be taken up and considered because it is information that might be critical for the public. So this will all be evaluated by the PCC in determining what information will be automatically available, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, DDG. Honorable Singh, is this a legacy hand or you want to make a follow-up question? Honorable Singh. Oh, I see he has lowered his hand. Thank you very much, honorable members and colleagues from the department. Thank you, DDGs that are present and the entire team from the department. Thank you for your presentation and the responses. I think I must now declare the meeting closed. Thank you very much, colleagues. The meeting is adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair.
Recording stopped.